somebody comes and says, I want to make sure that I don't run out of money in retirement. And I immediately look at their 401k and start choosing different mutual funds or rewrapping it in different packages and things and saying, oh, well, you're not taking enough risk or you're taking too much risk. Or, we go from such a risk analysis point of view a lot of times in this industry when it's actually, from a practical side of things, it's how much money do you need in retirement? Okay.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Money Therapy. My name is Brandon Chasteen, and I'm sitting alongside or across from, or I don't know, through the internet with
Bill McGill. Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, welcome to the show today. All right. So I had a thought today, but let me walk this in. Have you ever watched any of the True Detective series?
I think I saw the first one with Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. I think I saw the first 2 seasons, maybe.
Just watched the new season. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's Jodie Foster. I'm 99% sure. I'm terrible with famous people's names.
Okay.
But I'm almost 1,000% sure that it's her. And anyway, her character, she's kind of like the senior lead detective for this town, and she has this younger guy that's on the police force town police department, and he's her, I don't know, underling, if you will.
Okay.
But anyway, they're looking at a crime scene, and she says, she looks at him, she's like, "What's your question?" And he asks a question, and she's like, "Wrong question, ask again." And he asks another question, and she's like, "Wrong question, ask again." And she keeps, and his questions keep getting better and better and more specific and different details and taking turns. And then finally he asks a question, and you can just see the whole dynamic of their entire investigation shifted because of one single question that he finally asked. And it was only because she kept saying, "Next question, ask again, ask again, ask again."
Sure.
So that's kind of what came into my head today. I was listening to our last episode that we recorded. We talked a lot about market volatility. We talked about normal market rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it because a lot of people care about that.
It's true.
And a lot of people get emotional about it. And there's a lot of fear when markets go down. There's a lot of euphoria when markets go up. It seems like we're really, really focused on market performance and how it affects our net worth, maybe. But when I was listening to it today, you said something last week that kind of stood out to me. You said something to the effect, and it's not an exact quote, but you said something to the effect of, people that have plans, when markets go down, their heart rates will, they don't jump through the ceiling, jump through the roof. And that really just it made me think. I was like, I don't know if that's true. And then I started thinking more about the industry, not necessarily about what you do with your clients, not what I do with my clients, but just kind of what the industry promotes and suggests. And some of the old tools that we were using that really was perpetuating more anxiety in a lot of ways. It was almost like a financial plan, or just working with a financial advisor wasn't solving any of the problems. And then I started thinking about, okay, what is the question? What are people actually, ask the right question, ask a better question? And it's people come to me and they say a lot of things. But what they're generally saying is, am I okay? Am I on track? Will I be fine? How do I have some sort of peace of mind in an unknown future? How do I get rid of anxiety? How do I feel safe? And historically, in the industry that we work in, we say, oh, we can make you feel better, and we insert a whole bunch of risk by way of market investments. Anyway, it's a long stream of thought to
Yeah.
say, I think not only are people asking the wrong question most of the time, I think it's our job as professionals to help them ask the right question. And I want to hear your thoughts. And then I want to propose what I think might be one of the best questions to ask.
Hmm.
That I personally believe that if we start thinking and answering this specific question, we can eliminate and reduce a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree with a lot of the notion that you were talking about earlier. I mean, we as financial advisors, and a lot of advisors that we find in the industry immediately go into, problem solving mode. And a lot of what we tried to do with this podcast is realize that, a lot of times somebody may be telling you one thing, but they're actually either worried about or concerned or thinking about a totally different thing. Um, and so instead of just hearing what the person's saying and going right into problem diagnosis mode and figuring out how to fix that problem, thinking that that's how we get rid of anxiety, I think a lot of people miss the boat doing that. And I think that as financial advisors who have had clients that have come from other financial advisors in the industry, I think we kind of intuitively realize that, maybe that other person missed something because it comes out in interesting ways when we're talking to our clients, when they say things to the effect of, I just don't think that they understood what I was trying to do. I hear that a lot. Or, yeah, it just wasn't a good fit, or they just didn't get what we were trying to accomplish. Or, um, there's 100 different things, but those are really the three things that kind of come out of people's heads is just we weren't on the same page somehow. And whenever I hear that, kind of what you're talking about, as far as asking the right questions or digging a little deeper, I really try and pay attention to that and go, okay, something was missed. What was not addressed and what's actually important here? What can we prioritize and that sort of thing? So I think asking questions, one of my favorite questions is what keeps you up at night? And we've talked about this in the past, but it goes right to the emotional. We want to get in touch with the emotional side of things rather than, well, tell me about your savings account. Which one means more to people? How much is in their savings account, or that they feel secure and can sleep better at night because they know that the plan is in place, and as far as they know, their plan's going to work. And then, you and I have talked about this at length, but what questions lead me, instead of me talking about the plan, which questions lead to us constructing a plan that gets to the emotional side of the client?
That that's interesting. I want to I have two questions there.
Sure.
I don't know which one to ask first. Well, I think the first question that I have is, whose job is it to make sure the right questions are getting asked? Is it you as the professional, or is it they as the client?
I think it's mostly on the professional. Um, and the reason why I say that is when I think back to sometimes, I'll have an appointment, maybe with a prospective client who's thinking about coming on board. Um, and I've had a number that just didn't go quite right, and that person, decided not to come on board. And a lot of times I feel like it was almost like I didn't present myself in the correct way, or I couldn't express my ideas in the correct way for the client to understand, or maybe I didn't answer all of their questions the way that um, uh, maybe I just missed the boat a little bit. And so I always try, as an advisor, I always try and take ownership of that and say, well, it must have been, I must have done a really bad job of explaining something, or maybe I didn't get to that point to make sure that all the right questions were asked. Maybe I missed, and, maybe I wasn't listening, or maybe I just missed an aspect of this somewhere. I always try and blame it on myself because I do think that that is mostly on the financial advisor, on the professional.
How do you think because you kept talking about like the emotional side of things.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because I saw something that I can't think of. Brendan Fraser, he runs another podcast for advisors,
Yeah.
and he's a great guy, like really, really incredible thinker. Love what he puts out. Um, I can't remember exactly what he said. Something to the effect of like he posed a question and it was like dated 2014, and then he posed a similar question that was dated 2024, and it had something to do with like you know working with clients to build wealth versus working with clients to build time, and that like over the past decade the question that the advisor is asking is starting to shift, probably because in what he's probably really suggesting is like clients are demanding something different now. My
Yeah.
question is I understand we build trust, we build rapport with our clients. I too think it's so important to move past the superficial and get into the deep emotional human side of things and get to the raw like stuff to say, okay, this is our purpose, this is why we're really doing this. Now there's conviction behind direction. That creates just a whole different level of intentionality that a lot of people will never get to if they don't have a process to get there. But
Sure.
the thing is how much does your plan change, right? If I come to you and I have, a $500,000 in an IRA, and I have a goal to retire in 10 years, and I have, I've checked all the boxes, like I have cash, my income's great, my cash flow's efficient. I'm living a good life, enjoying time with my family. And I'm just like, Bill, I just want to definitely make sure I get to a point where when it's time for me to walk away, I know that I have enough money for the rest of my life. Like if I just present that at a superficial level, and then you're like, well, we got to figure this out. Like, and you start asking the deeper questions, and we go to the emotional side of things. Does your plan of attack change?
Well, it depends on what the answers are. I mean, my brain immediately goes to, well, what does not running out of money mean? Like, what are we trying to do in retirement? Right. So are we, are we trying to buy a lake house? Are we trying to buy a yacht? Are we just we want to golf with our buddies on Tuesday, once a week? What is, I have to learn about you to figure out what it is in your life that turns you on and the things that you want to keep going and keep
Heyo.
doing. What'd you say?
Said, heyo. Find out what turns me on.
Okay. We took a right turn here. Uh, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I got to learn about the client and we have to develop that relationship. And I have to figure out, what kind of life do you want to live?
Yeah.
Is it, how expansive is it? How, some people would say bougie, but, that's before I start putting price tags on things and doing all my calculations and projections and all that stuff. Like, I got to figure out where we're going. I got to figure out because I could come back to you the next week and go, yeah, in 10 years, you'll be able to retire with $5,000 a month based on what I'll be able to do for you and all my projections and everything else. Like, I can get us to $5,000 a month, thinking that's a huge victory. And if the guy or gal says, dude, I think I need 7 or 8. Well, I didn't do anything for that client. I may have made all the right financial decisions for them, done all the right, portfolio building, make really smart investment decisions, but that's a completely different formula based on my next couple of questions and what their responses are. You got to dig a little deeper.
Yeah. I I think those questions, so like in a similar situation, like I think my questions would be very similar. I think what I'm trying to figure out is what is he or she like really worried about, and
Hmm.
in approaching me about this. Like, I think it could be one of those things where saying like, I want to make sure I never run out of money. Like, again, at the surface level, that's easy to communicate. It's easy to hear, right? But my questions would like, what's happened in this guy's life that makes running out of money worrisome? What does he think? What does he assume? What has he experienced to make running out of money the number one thing that he wants to prevent in his life? I mean, I was at a lunch earlier today and listened to this guy's like life story about his mother dying from cancer and then him getting cancer. And even sitting there after that conversation, like in this room of a whole bunch of business owners, hearing the person like on the way out talk to me like, hey, we should talk about this because I definitely don't want to put myself in this kind of situation, talking about finances. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's like, we just sat through a tremendous story where the outcome was death from cancer for one person and fighting through cancer to survival from the other person. And you're worried about running out of money. I don't know that that's tell me more, right? Let's get deeper into this, because if I can get you to ask the right question, right? Is it fear of being a burden to someone that has to provide for you? Is it a fear of being alone? Is it fear of getting to a point one day where you can't provide for your family? All these things start to come to mind. And I think sometimes with clients, it's easy for them to say things simply. And if we don't do our job, it's easy for us to take those simple words and we never connect. We actually never solve the problem. Does that make sense what
Right.
I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I get it completely.
Good.
Yeah.
So with asking the right question, again, one of the things that I started thinking of, I told you I wanted to like, when we ask the right questions, I think our intentionality, our focus can shift. And one of the things that I started thinking about is, as a financial planner, like with what I know, where I'm at in my life and where I see people at later in life, what is the one thing? And this is obviously different slightly for everyone. Um, but going back to last week's show when we talked a lot about the focus of people is generally on the volatility of the market. That's where fear kind of hits us quick sometimes.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's about the the dollar value of our net worth today, right? That should be our focus. I really do think in every endeavor that I'm spending time on with clients, 9 times out of 10, we're trying to create greater cash flow. Like in everything we do, we're trying to create better cash flow. If
Yeah.
if they're still working, we're trying to make their cash flow super efficient so that way they can use their cash flow to enjoy life and to build new streams of revenue. There's the thumbs up thing. Build new streams of revenue for the future, right? And then
Yeah.
if we build new streams of revenue for the future, hopefully those streams of revenue will grow in size to where we can use that cash flow to then that new cash flow to create the next cash flow generating investment, right?
Right.
um I was thinking about some of the like ultra high net worth people that I've worked for and that work for, and we don't ever really talk about the asset value of anything that they own today.
Right.
We're always talking about, hey, did the cash flow go up last month? Did my cash flow increase from last year? How much did my cash flow increase? Because they're
Hmm.
in their minds, they're always thinking, how do I use my available dollars to create
Hmm.
more dollars in the future? Because the more dollars that my dollars can create, the less time I have to work to create those. Does that make sense?
Sure.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the first thing that comes to mind, just on a little, practical offshoot here, is if you've ever read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. The whole premise of the book is thinking differently than possibly you've ever thought before.
Mhm.
But in that, one of the things that he talks about and really drills into you as the reader is the definition of an asset. And to him, it's basically what you just outlined is like an asset, or is something that I invest in that eventually leads back to more income for me as a
Okay.
person or a business. So investing in an asset puts more money or cash flow, and he uses cash flow a lot, into the income side of my financial statement, if you will. um, and so I think that goes hand in hand in what we're trying to voice and kind of look at here is how do we view things a little bit differently that at the same time will assist us in addressing the needs of the client. So to give a specific example for what we've been talking about here today is somebody comes and says, I want to make sure that I don't run out of money in retirement, and I immediately look at their 401k and start choosing different mutual funds or rewrapping it in different packages and things and saying, oh, well, you're not taking enough risk, or you're taking too much risk, or we go from such a risk analysis point of view a lot of times in this industry, when it's actually, from a practical side of things, is how much money do you need in retirement? Okay, you need $5,000 a month. How do I create $5,000 of cash flow for you? And yeah, the 401k is going to be a tool that we use. Maybe you've got a rental property, or maybe you have a business that you can, hire people and still own when you're in retirement. But that simple question of like, okay, what is money for, and why are we, what life are we trying to, money's a tool. What's money for, and what kind of life are we trying to set up for ourselves? That's really what we're doing. And then the 401ks, IRAs, mutual funds, and all those things. I like to tell clients, like, that's just in my toolbox. Like, those are my tools that I use.
Yeah.
But what's really important to me is to figure out, again, where are we going and what problem I need to solve. If you come in and tell me I just want to have enough money, it's like, great, but I need a crystal clear picture on what that looks like, because we live in a very tangible world. And so I think that's, in our effort, like I said, to kind of reiterate, in our effort to change the thinking in the industry, we have to look at our financial statements and finances in a completely different way. And cash flow is a very, we've found success, and we've found that it's pretty effective way of looking at different problems.
Yeah. I think just to kind of put this in perspective for like somebody that's listening right now, if I own a house, right, a residential house that I let someone rent from me, all right,
Yeah.
let's say my residential house that I have, it's an investment property, it costs me $500,000 to purchase this. Okay. So I have $500,000. I have a mortgage. Let's say that mortgage is $2,500 a month, right? And let's say I'm charging my tenant $3,000 a month to live there. All right.
Sure.
The thing about the tenant paying me $3,000 a month to live there, and my mortgage being a $2,500 expense, right? That nets me $500 a month. What changes? What changes in that calculation if the housing market pulls back and my home value for today is $480,000?
Yeah. Nothing.
Nothing changes,
Assuming
right?
that you still have a tenant in there.
Assuming I still have the tenant in there, right? But assuming that nothing changes, and if the tenant leaves, then you can get another tenant, right? And that's a risk of a rental property, is that you might have to skip a month where you don't have the tenant. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is that you nothing changes in the cash flow scenario if the asset decreases by 20 grand, or if the assets increase and appreciate by 20 grand. As of today, the cash flow situation doesn't change, right?
Right.
And that actually works the same way with equity holdings for the most part, like with stocks and bonds. Many times when we purchase a stock that pays a dividend, the
Hmm.
dividend is established that like inside of like the annual meetings and things like that, like the board will decide, hey, we're going to pay $1 per share annually. So they'll pay like 25 cents a quarter. And let's say the stock price is $50 and they're going to pay $1 a year, it doesn't matter if the stock price goes up to 55 or goes down to 45. You're still getting the $1 per year per
Yeah.
share, right? Now, can the board increase that? Can the board decrease that? Yes. And that's the point. Like, let's ask the right question. And so I just want to follow up last week's episode to say, if you're super anxious about market volatility and the fact that, if we go into a correction, your investments might be down 8-10%. Your net worth might come down a little bit if you're not actively contributing to your portfolio, and if you're overexposed to like equity investments, your portfolio might come down a little bit. But I would then, instead of focusing on that very temporary thing that the market goes through from time to time, part of that healthy rhythm, I would say ask the right question. Ask again. Did my cash flow change? If we go through a period of time, there were like through COVID, and after COVID, there were several companies that have paid dividends for decades that decided to suspend their dividend. Okay. Because frankly, cash flow for those companies were really like uncertain at that time. There's a lot going on. So they suspended the dividend, right?
Yeah.
So if you would have asked the right question at that point, instead of being like, well, is my portfolio up or down? The question was, my cash flow is less right now because companies are suspending dividends. That can lead to probably better steering of the portfolio, right? Because then it can become, okay, well, maybe we're relying too much on equities. What about bonds? There was no issues with federal bonds paying their coupons on time throughout the whole time, right?
Sure.
There's also insurance products that can guarantee payments, right?
Sure.
Streams of income. Okay. So there's a whole lot of between real estate and equities and bonds and insurances and, pensions. There's all these things that will guarantee, will put in place a predictable future income, right? And
Right.
that income will probably shift from year to year. But for me, my clients that are thinking about the future, we're asking the question, how do we set up a cash flow situation that supports the lifestyle you want to live? Just like what you were saying, right? But
Sure.
even now, with my clients that are working, the question is, how do we create additional streams of income while you're working? So that way your earned income and all these passive incomes allow for us to grow your portfolio and make future investments that will then produce more income. So by the time you get to retirement, the income that you're producing is everything that you need. So because that's now all of a sudden you can kind of see how legacy happens, right? I have
Yeah.
clients right now that are retired, and every time they need money, I have to sell an asset. And once I sell that asset and give them that cash and they spend the cash, their portfolio has gotten smaller. I also have clients whose assets are producing income and they're big, and what they need is relatively smaller than what they have. And so every year I'm giving them money and their assets continue to grow and grow and grow. Now all of
Yeah.
a sudden we're like thinking about trust and how to transition assets to future generations, and we're creating legacy, right? The kids and the grandkids are getting a head start, right? And they're building vision, they're building values in the family, they're building all these things that can help these families grow. But I think asking the question, is my cash flow increasing, is such a better question to ask than what's the market going to do later this year.
Yep. I think so too.
Any other thoughts you got in that?
No, not really. My picture will be back here in just a second, but there we
There
go.
you are.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy balance between the bigger picture and the smaller picture. And the bigger picture is the legacy planning that you were talking about, the trust aspects. Um, and a lot of times that comes from a place of healthy cash flow and being able to sustain that cash flow. And so, where legacy and trust is the bigger picture of finances for a lot of people, the cash flow, the net worth of today, and asking yourself periodically, are those two things increasing, is a way to basically keep your finger on the pulse.
Mhm.
And in both those instances, like you point out, we're not fixated on the growth of the market or, excuse me, the dipping of the market. Um, we're kind of off to the other side, looking at, different elements of personal finance. Um, and what we're talking about there is, insulation from the market, right? And insulation from aspects of our lives that do, present risk to us and our families. Um, and I think that's important going back to our first point, the first thing that a lot of people in the financial industry do when working with clients is they jump to repackaging risk and trying to, either sell you on more risk or less risk or risk that's not appropriate for you as a person. But um, a lot of times that misses the mark, and it's like, okay, well, you know, one good way to eliminate risk is to have cash flow. And how do we fix that problem?
I think cash flow is you know a center theme in opportunity, right?
Mhm.
Like without having your cash flow correct, your inner opportunities are going to come and go. Um, I think there's a lot of ways to increase efficiency in cash flow, right? We can
Mhm.
increase our income, whether it's earned income, create new passive streams of income. That's something I work with a lot of my clients on is how do we create more? I want to create
Mhm.
more. Like I want to get to the next thing. It I have a client right now that is doing something quite like it is as simple as he is making coloring books for kids, right? I have other clients that are working on like publishing books and launching, Amazon storefronts and doing all the things that they can and do have access to in order to create streams. We got clients right now that are working. One just last week closed on an investment property. One
Mhm.
trying to do a land acquisition to chop it up and sell it to a developer. Um, the creating the next stream of revenue, constantly searching how do I increase more, more, and more. The other side of that is as we get more, 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 we have to understand what are the tools and resources that we have that are legally available to us
Mhm.
to decrease our tax liability,
Yeah.
right? If I double my income and I triple my uh, bill, that's not super efficient, right? If I
Sure.
double my income and keep my taxes minimum, that's efficiency, right? So,
Sure.
and then once we do all that, then we can say, okay, how's our spending look? Is the right amount of spending going to debt? Like, am I leveraged appropriately? Do I have too much? If
Mhm.
I don't have much, how much is there any kind of debt out there that could increase my earnings capacity?
Sure.
So like all these questions about cash flow start to come in to today, right now,
Mhm.
and is my cash flow increasing? Your financial professional should be working with you on that, and
Yeah.
that should be a measurement. It's a vital sign that should be measured, and progress should be noted. And I would almost say that there's very few market, especially like stock market scenarios, that should impact your cash flow this year. I don't see much that unless you're selling assets, right? Because that could, if you're actively selling assets, that could impact it. But there is not much that could happen in the next 12 months that would impact your cash flow from a stock market standpoint,
Yeah. Yeah, it would be
right?
hard.
So
Mhm.
if my clients that are listening to this say, hey, Brandon, in 2024, I want to hold you accountable to helping me increase my cash flow. I think that's a super fair. I think that's the right question. I think it's the better question to ask. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's a fair measurement for me as a financial professional hired by my clients. I think that's something that we need to focus on. We need to get busy doing. If you're not working with somebody that does that, call me, call Bill.
Yeah.
But if you also just don't have somebody, you don't need somebody yet, I would be thinking to yourself, how can I create better, more efficient cash flows? Right.
Yeah.
Because that is stuff that we can control.
Yeah. One thing that I want to kind of challenge people out there to think about, as we're in this vein of thinking about things differently, asking different questions, an exercise that I like to do with a lot of my clients is I ask them to visualize their household as a business.
Mm,
And whether it's, a married couple or a single person, let's just say, let's say I was single as an example. It would be okay. Bill McGill Incorporated is my business, right? And
yeah.
Bill McGill Incorporated has X amount of income. Okay. And then Bill McGill, Bill McGill has X amount of expenses. And then what assets and liabilities does Bill McGill have? And are those assets increasing? Like, how many streams of income does Bill McGill Incorporate have?
Right.
Well, Bill McGill works at McDonald's, and then he, tutors on the side, and then he, whatever those things are that you do, how many different streams of income do you have? And then
Right.
through your expenses and liabilities, we can determine, how efficient are you? Liability, for instance, in this conversation, taxes are a liability. Um, and so think about yourself or your household, your husband and wife, as a business. And that might help you visualize the cash flow a little bit easier. Like I said, it's an exercise I like to do with some clients, and it may help. It may help Brandon and I, as well as you guys out there, um, ask better questions and look at things a little bit differently. Which is all we're trying to do is shift, how we are looking at personal finances and how we are addressing problems with that thinking.
I I love that. And I think that there are like other exercises out there because like this thought, ask a better question, ask the right question. Like this is so applicable to so many pieces of our life.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure.
if we get to a point where we can constantly be thinking, am I asking the right question? Am I saying the right thing? Am I telling people what I feel? Am I using easy words or am I using the right words? Um, it's applicable in your relationship with your spouse, your kids. It's applicable in your business. It's applicable with like the next sales call that you're on. It's applicable with so much, but it's really, really applicable to setting the conditions for success in your future when it comes to defining your goals and managing your own anxieties through the future, which is completely unknown and can be very scary. Um,
Yeah,
so if we're constantly thinking about that, I think some of the things that we have to do is one, we have to know who we are, right? For me to ask the right question, I have to be introspective and understand who I am. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and they were talking about, and I'm gonna mess this up. I think it's like the interfamily dynamic, or it's something to do with like we have our old selves inside of us, right? Like I have 5-year-old Brandon inside of me. And sometimes if like a circumstance triggers something that 5-year-old me went through, the 5-year-old kind of comes out.
sure.
Right. So in talking to my kid and talking to my fiance, like sometimes it's if you kind of picture, right? Like, who am I talking to? So, like, if I'm talking to my fiance, and let's say we're having a disagreement on something, right? If I can be empathetic enough to ask, like, okay, who am I in disagreement with right now? Is it Mackenzie right now today, or is something that I'm doing, or something that we're going through right now triggering something from like when Mackenzie was 8 years old and she went through back then? So this is more about fear from a prior experience, and it exists in her when she was 8. So now this kind of like 8-year-old reaction might be coming out, right?
Sure.
But if you can visualize that in the moment and you can be that like introspective of moments, Instead of saying, hey, how do I respond? Or I'm going to respond to this way because this is who I'm talking to. Say, actually, I'm talking to this like 8-year-old girl, right?
Hmm.
How much can our dynamic and tone and desire change for the outcome? I think it just gives space to patience. But same thing, like all of that said, I think if we just start to say, what is the right question that I need to ask? Because what I'm asking, it's expressing something, but it's not really what it is, right? Like sometimes the volatility, people are always scared about the volatility, but historically markets come back. There's just not much to be afraid of if you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And you're taking, if and that stuff's actually easy to manage. Like how much risk do you need? How much risk do you don't need? How much, we know how to diversify. We know all this stuff,
Yeah.
right? 30 years ago, they didn't have all the technology and the information, the access that we have today. So it's a
Right.
little bit scary. There's a lot more unknown. There's a lot more trust that was required. Nowadays,
Yeah.
it's not the same, but we're still afraid of the same thing, or at least we say we are. So
Yeah.
I would encourage through this whole thing, these wild streams of thought that we've been talking about, ask the right question. And I think the right question for 2024 is how can I increase my cash flow? Whether
Yeah.
that is through creating better margins, whether that is creating new additional streams of revenue, whether it's creating new, cash flow scenarios inside the household or through investments or through earned or passive. It doesn't matter. How can I increase my cash flow?
Yeah. I think that's where we hang it up, dude. I think that's
All right.
good.
Great.
Everybody out there, please like and subscribe, especially on YouTube and Spotify. But you can get us anywhere that you get your podcasts. If you want to reach out to Brandon or I, go to harpethwealthpartners.com. Both of our emails are there. And anytime you guys have a question, you can either email us or comment down below, and then we can address those hopefully on the next episode.
We would love to talk about your questions. We are constantly trying to create the right content. And if you have any thoughts for us or have questions about the money world, the finance world, the investment world, whatever those questions are, let us know because we want to talk about those things for you. We appreciate you. And we appreciate your time. And we hope it's helpful because it matters. And you matter. We'll talk to you soon.
Adios.
Bye. We hope you learned something valuable today. We appreciate you including us in your journey towards financial betterment. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes only and not to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions about how it might be uniquely applicable to you, please discuss that with a financial professional or, of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you about your specific questions, needs, or circumstances. We welcome you to reach out to us via our website, harpethwealthpartners.com, or by emailing Brandon at bmc@harpethwealthpartners.com. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not to be intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult appropriate qualified professionals prior to making a decision. Investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. We want to thank you for your time and we look forward to having you back next week.